We've been exploring some of the different character creation options in Neverwinter Nights. And in this Tactico, we're going to explore non-synergy characters. Because while there is a tremendous amount of freedom in the game, we want to make sure we're able to play through the various modules. Now, to sidebar for a moment, competitive play versus kind of narrative play in Neverwinter Nights. Neverwinter Nights uses the D&D 3.5, 3.0, 3.x engine, which reduces everything down to a DC, a difficulty check. You want to be able to hit a target, you have to beat the DC, which is the armor class. You want to beat spell resistance, magic resistance, different effects, you have to beat a DC. So generally speaking, the number of attacks that you get with the highest bonus, base attack bonus, essentially the most pluses, or if you're a spellcaster, arcane, the ability to have the highest check that your opponent has to beat or the target has to beat is what makes your character powerful. I mean, in addition to hit points and gear. So focusing on a particular character class and taking that base attack, that damage, those hit points, and that DC check as high as possible, min-max, everything else is kind of secondary, creates a very, very powerful character. That's competitive play. Now, how powerful is too powerful or how much is necessary? In a lot of modules, most of the characters can easily complete them. Likewise, once you hit a certain level of power, you don't really need to go much more because you'll be able to beat most stuff in the game. So now we start to see kind of a little bit more of a narrative where I don't need 100% absolute optimization. I can experiment with some different character classes, maybe some different feats and some different gear and spells, but I still need to be mindful of that DC. Now, once we take multiple character classes, there are some that work extremely well together. There are some that are kind of so-so, and then there are other character classes that the idea is there. And I've been there, right? The idea is there. You've got a cool idea for a character class, but the synergy doesn't exist at all. Based on the rule set, they go in the opposite directions. And the challenge here is, while you can play it, the game is going to let you play it. And we're going to explore some examples once we sidebar back. The challenge is going to be, we don't want to hit a certain level or certain modules where it's no longer fun or it really didn't work out. You're going to have to start over with your character class, or if you're on PC, open up the editor and kind of change things back and take it in a different direction. Okay, we can take up to 3 character classes. That doesn't always mean we want to take the 3 character classes. A pure character class, like let's look at a wizard. A pure wizard, piling all of your levels into wizard, pre-epic, epic, whatever the breakdown is going to be, is going to give you the most powerful wizard compared to if you play a wizard and then take a second class or a third class, because you're piling all of that DC, that base attack, those spell levels, those bonus levels, bonus spells, everything into that wizard class, likewise a fighter or a rogue. When you dip into a second character class, we want to be aware of the main attributes that affect DC level progression and ability. Okay, an example that I want to say doesn't quite work. I mean, you can make it, and I've tried it just to try it out, but eventually it hits a point where it does neither very well, and it struggles. A monk wizard, playing a monk wizard. So I divide my levels, maybe evenly or maybe not evenly, into primarily a monk and primarily a wizard. The base stat, we see this, every character class has a primary base stat or primary stats that it's going to utilize. The monk utilizes wisdom, strength and dexterity to a lesser extent, but the monk powers for that DC and the armor class and the abilities are fueled by wisdom. I need as many pluses as I can get in there. But at the same time, wizard needs intelligence to be able to not only cast certain spell levels, but be able to throw out the highest damage and the highest DC. So in character creation, even if I split them pretty evenly and sacrifice some of the other stats, now what happens is I level up. Where do I put that plus something? As I gain feats, as I gain gear, where do I go? This is a non-synergy character. It's going to be divided where the primary attributes and the primary focus just doesn't work. Okay, another example, and this is a character that I've played In D&D 3.5, 3.x, 3.0, Neverwinter Nights and Tabletop, I like the idea, but it never really kind of worked out. The spell sword. I mean, that's why, to sidebar, in D&D 3.5, the prestige classes really are necessary to do certain things you want to do in 3.5. Neverwinter Nights has some prestige classes. Shadow Dancer's a lot of fun. Assassin's kind of interesting, but it's a different engine, and you can only have so much in the game. But in Tabletop 3.5, 3.0, 3.x, Hexblade is a great example of like a spell sword, a fighter type class, a martial class that also utilizes magic, and the penalties aren't there. But if you want to play that in Neverwinter Nights, let's say you go with fighter because you want the feats, and you go with wizard. Well, I have to increase the intelligence. Well, okay, we'll sacrifice wisdom, we'll sacrifice charisma, we'll keep strength, we'll keep that dex, and maybe we keep constitution or lower it so we don't get one less hit point a level, then we can kind of equal it out with toughness. I mean, there's some things you can do so it's not that bad starting out, and essentially go for fighter and go for wizard. But as it continues, now I have two different attributes. I'm trying to deal that massive damage as a fighter, so I want to put that in strength. But I need the intelligence for a wizard, just for the spells and the DC. If I pile 50-50 as we go, or if I put some or in the other, I'm always going to be divided. It's a non-synergy. It's not as good as playing a pure class or dipping in to one level to gain something. And we'll talk about that in a moment, where you can have classes that are non-synergy, but dipping into one level gains you a lot with what it opens up. That's a little bit different. Likewise, playing a fighter, wizard, spell sword, that type of class, well, I've got armor check penalties, so right away I'm never going to wear the heavier armor. I mean, I could use meta magic and feats like that, but they come in at a higher level. And likewise, I'm never going to have the hit points of a fighter because, well, I'm dipping into wizard and I'm putting into wizard. So you can do this, but the classes, I mean, the engine supports it, but these character classes that don't have a similar synergy are not going to work. Now, things that have a similar synergy that could work, if we look at, say, druid, and we look at monk, character classes that have a primary attribute that are similar, those character classes are a little bit easier to play. Now, I'm not saying don't, play multiple character classes. It's in the engine. And for the most part, the way the game is intended to work under the 3.5, 3.0, 3.x rule set is you have your base class and then you qualify for a prestige class. So essentially you have two. You have one for a long time, pile into two, and develop the two. The other way is to dip in to gain one aspect. So if I was going to play kind of a spell sword, a wizard fighter, I would take one level of fighter. I would not try to have the hit points, the base attack bonuses, any of that stuff, but I would dip into fighter, so this way it opens up the primary feats, opens up the 3 armor classes, opens up different aspects that I'm going to gain right away, weapon proficiencies, armor, that base, and taking one level, those feats, I could do that in wizard, right? As a wizard, you can select those. They show up. They're general feats. But I'm burning a massive amount of feats where if I just take one level of fighter, that opens all of those up. Then maybe I use my magic skills to kind of bolster those and utilize those. Another example, perhaps the best example of dipping into one feat if you don't have synergy to gain things. I enjoy playing a Shadow Dancer. I will regularly play a Shadow Dancer, level 10 or beyond. It's kind of a neat character class. But within that framework, I do have to agree that kind of if we're min-maxing and playing the meta, the best option for Shadow Dancer is just to take one level. Just take level 1, because what that opens up is hide in plain sight. I can get everything else and develop everything else elsewhere. So you see a lot of characters where it's like, druid this, druid that, and you have Shadow Dancer 1. Or rogue this, assassin that, Shadow Dancer 1. And really, I've seen like Paladin, but Shadow Dancer 1. Obviously, you need the feats and the skills to qualify. But sometimes you'll dip into a character class just to gain that one possible ability. And in terms of character development, if you're dipping into a non-synergy class, that's okay because you're only burning one character level. I've seen some builds Naturally, Bard, Rogue, Use Magic Device is one of the most powerful skills in the game. And I pushed that up to the Neverwinter Nights channel here, exploring that. So we're not going to get into that detail exactly. But within that framework, if you're not going Rogue or you're not going that aspect, some characters will dip into one level of Wizard just to gain the ability to use certain items or use certain aspects without having to pile in and load up on UMD. But we'll see that too sometimes. You'll dip into one. So, character development. And again, lots of ways to play Neverwinter Nights. And the first entry point is, are you going for min-max meta power gaming because you're on that server or it's that module? Or you want to play a little bit more narrative and try some different stuff while the character doesn't have to be 100% super buffed optimized. You can still make it through many modules. Some character classes seem interesting to start out. Hey, what if I do this? What if I do that? But because they are going in opposite directions for primary attributes, skills, and synergy, you get to a point, levels 8 to 10 where it's just not working and it slows down and it breaks down, and you either got to restart, retool, or worse, you're not going to have a fun playthrough of the game.